1700s, 1800s, 1900s. Nationalization is the process of transforming privately owned assets into public assets by bringing them under the public ownership of a national government or state. Nationalization usually refers to private assets or to assets owned by lower levels of government being transferred to the state. Nationalization contrasts with privatization and with demutualization. When previously nationalized assets are privatized and subsequently returned to public ownership at a later stage, they are said to have undergone renationalization. Industries often subject to nationalization include the commanding heights of the economy: telecommunications, electric power, fossil fuels, railways, airlines, iron ore, media, postal services, banks, and water, though, in many jurisdictions, many such entities have no history of private ownership. Nationalization may occur with or without compensation to the former owners. Nationalization is distinguished from property redistribution in that the government retains control of nationalized property. Some nationalizations take place when a government seizes property acquired illegally. For example, in 1945 the French government seized the car maker Renault because its owners had collaborated with the 1940 to 1944 Nazi occupiers of France. In September 2021, Berliners voted to expropriate over 240,000 housing units, many of which were being held unoccupied as investment property. Economists can distinguish between nationalization and socialization, which refers to the process of restructuring the economic framework, organizational structure, and institutions of an economy on a socialist basis. By contrast, nationalization does not necessarily imply social ownership and the restructuring of the economic system. By itself, nationalization has nothing to do with socialism. Historically, states have carried out nationalizations for various different purposes under a wide variety of different political systems and economic systems. Since nationalized industries are state-owned, the government is responsible for meeting any debts. The nationalized industries do not normally borrow from the domestic market other than for short-term borrowing. If they are profitable, the profit is often used to finance other state services, such as social programs and government research, which can help lower the tax burden. The traditional Western stance on compensation was expressed by United States Secretary of State Cordell Hull during the Mexican nationalization of the petroleum industry in 1938, saying that compensation should be prompt, effective, and adequate. According to this view, the nationalizing state is obligated under international law to pay the deprived party the full value of the property taken. The opposing position has been taken mainly by developing countries, claiming that the question of compensation should be left entirely up to the sovereign state. In line with the Calvo doctrine, socialist states have held that no compensation is due, based on the view that private ownership over socialized assets is illegitimate, exploitative, or a hindrance to further economic development. In 1962, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 1803, Permanent Sovereignty over National Resources, which states that in the event of nationalization, the owner shall be paid appropriate compensation in accordance with international law. In doing so, the UN rejected the traditional Calvo doctrinal view and the communist view. The term, appropriate compensation, represents a compromise between the traditional views, taking into account the need of developing countries to pursue reform, even without the ability to pay full compensation, and the Western concern for the protection of private property. In the United States, the Fifth Amendment requires just compensation if private property is taken for public use. Nationalization was one of the major mechanisms advocated by reformist socialists and social democrats for gradually transitioning to socialism. In this context, the goals of nationalization were to dispossess large capitalists, redirect the profits of industry to the public purse, and establish some form of workers' self-management as a precursor to the establishment of a socialist economic system. In the United Kingdom after the Second World War, nationalization gained support by the Labour Party and some social democratic parties throughout Western Europe. although sometimes undertaken as part of a strategy to build socialism. More commonly, nationalization was also undertaken and used to protect and develop industries perceived as being vital to the nation's competitiveness, or to protect jobs in certain industries. A renationalization occurs when state-owned assets are privatized and later nationalized again, often when a different political party or faction is in power. A renationalization process may also be called reverse privatization. Nationalization.